Hello and welcome to Macroeconomics. We're going to be talking about supply today. And first, before we talk about supply, we're going to look at the law of supply, which states there is a direct or positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. In our last video, we looked at the demand curve, and we looked at the demand curve for Pop-Tarts, and that had a negative or downward sloping or inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Supply is going to be a little bit different. Since you're the producer, of course, you're going to want to supply more of it at a higher price, right here. We're going to want to supply more, and we're going to want to supply less at a lower price. So let's take a look at what our curve would look like, our supply curve, and we have this upward sloping curve. So as price decreases, our quantity supplied decreases, right? And as price increases, our quantity supplied increases. And that is the law of supply. All right, let's look at our shifters. Some people will tell you there's 5, some will say 6. There are always various debate on that. There are a number of different shifters, but we're going to focus on these 6. Prices and availability of inputs, or prices of resources. So for example, if we're looking at Pop-Tarts, we need flour, eggs, milk, jelly that goes inside. If those prices of those resources that we use to make the product increase, we'll supply less of it. If they decrease, we can supply more of it. Number of sellers. If you have more people selling the good, right, you have more companies entering the market and providing some sort of Pop-Tart-like food, you'll have a greater supply. If sellers or suppliers leave the market, you'll have fewer Pop-Tarts. Technology, of course, is always increasing our ability to produce something. Very rarely does technology decrease. However, some horrific event might cause that to happen. But for the most part, technology or advances in technology are always going to increase supply. Government actions, so taxes and subsidies, right? Taxes are going to decrease your supply. If you increase taxes, you decrease supply. And that's a long discussion. It depends, but for the most part, we say an increase in taxes decreases supply, and decrease in taxes could increase your supply. Subsidies are basically government handouts. It's money given to you. A government will give you money in the hopes that you will produce more of it, or they'll lower your subsidies and you won't produce as much of it. So opportunity cost of alternative production basically means if you're producing Pop-Tarts and or Eggos, you can produce both of them, and you realize that people are willing and able to pay a lot more for Eggos, you're going to produce Eggos and not Pop-Tarts. So your supply for Pop-Tarts would decrease, and vice versa. If Eggos, right, people don't want to spend that much, but they want to spend a lot on Pop-Tarts, then you should supply more Pop-Tarts and supply less Eggos. Expectations of future profit. If you think, right, you have a bunch of Pop-Tarts and you think in 6 months you'll be able to sell your Pop-Tarts for $15 a box, you're not going to supply a lot of Pop-Tarts right now. You're going to supply very few Pop-Tarts right now. You're going to wait, and then you're going to supply them when you think you can get a lot of money for it. And vice versa. If you think in 6 months your $4 box of Pop-Tarts will only be 50 cents, you're going to supply as many of it as you can now so that you can get more money, more profit. Remember, changes in price do not shift the curve. All right, let's look at some supply practice. Number from 1 through 6. Shifter, increase, decrease, left or right. Be very careful with supply. It doesn't happen as often with demand, but a lot of people will say supply goes up, right? And they'll do this with their supply curve, and they'll say supply goes up, and that is not no, that is incorrect. Supply, when it increases, goes to the right, and supply, when it decreases, goes to the left. Not up and not down. These are rightward and leftward shifts. Please be careful of that. All right, why don't you pause the video, put those down. Okay, here are your supply practice. Again, pause the video, find the shifter, increase, decrease, shift left or right. Ready, go. Okay, let's look at the first one. Disease kills 20% of cows. Well, that's an availability of a resource. We're looking at hamburgers. So if 20% of our cows die, our inputs are gone, we will supply fewer burgers. Price of burgers increases to 20%. No change. This is just a price increase. If the price increases, then greater quantity supplied, right? Not the whole supply curve will shift. Number 3, government taxes burger producers. Okay, well, they're taxing them, so they're taking more of their money that they would have used to produce burgers, and so supply decreases. Number 4, government increases subsidies to cattle ranchers by 30%. We assume that they'll have more cows and hamburgers will be more plentiful, so supply will go up. Number 5, new burger patty making robot used by many chains. Cuts production time by a quarter. Okay, this is technology. So we got new robots and it's allowing us to produce more burgers or produce burgers faster so we can supply more in the same amount of time. Minimum wage increases to $20 per hour. Okay, a lot of people say this is government actions, right? The government causes. Like, well, I get your point. Well, whenever we talk about government actions, we're talking about taxes and subsidies. This is a minimum wage law, and this is the price of your input or the price of your labor. And so since the price of your labor went up, your supply will decrease. And that's all we got. I hope you got them all right. If not, please ask me some questions or shoot me an email. Thank you.